So we're introducing a new sort of semi-regular feature here on Find the Fabulist, which is the Mailbag, wherein I respond to some of the better comments I've received, whether those be questions, whether those be insights, anything I've seen from you that strikes me as interesting or insightful in some way adds to the conversation we're having around this particular part of the video game world. If you have anything of note to say, I will be responding to it. I'm not going to promise to do this on a regular basis. I'm not going to promise this is going to be a monthly thing or whatever, but I will be keeping track of your comments as long as they are polite. I don't mind critical comments. They have to be polite comments because I am a person. I am not just a voice at the other end of the internet, as much as you may think of me as such. As long as your comments are polite, I will be collecting some of the more interesting ones to respond to them. So we'll start off with this comment from Shorter Recording. This was on the trends to look out for. Number 10 was the idea of mix and match mechanics, where a lot of indie games these days don't really fall into a specific genre or even cross-genre. They're kind of a muddle of mechanics. And the comment is thus: I categorize certain games into a miscellaneous or WTF category. These aren't always the best games ever, but they're my favorites to try out and explore. So no question, one of the most interesting things about the smaller developers that makes them, in my opinion, much more interesting than the larger developers is that they are more free to take risks. When you're at the top, when you're putting a lot of money behind games, when you're expecting to receive a big return, you kind of have to play it safe, which is why AAA games, at any given time, you're usually looking at 2, 3, at most 4 genres, and it's just kind of the same thing over and over again. With the indies, you get all sorts of madness, and that's good for me. It's good for me as a reviewer. I found that just as a reviewer, it's a lot easier for me to write about games that have some degree of novelty, that are bringing some new ideas, whether that is a new mechanic, whether that is an interesting aesthetic or story element, or whether it's a combination of things I've never seen before. Now, I will say, those are not necessarily my favorites. I think that they're great. It's great that those things exist. They're not necessarily my favorite games either. I had another comment from someone who was, I think, seemed almost slightly ashamed of like his favorite games from 2024 because they were a little bit more conventional. They were sort of sequels, and that's not really what you look for in the indie space. But honestly, you like what you like. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from this, is it's okay to like what you like. You don't have to like what other people tell you is good. You can enjoy what you enjoy, and that's fine. And as a reviewer, yeah, it's easier for me to review games that are innovative. They often jump out when I'm looking at, a Next Fest where 30% of the games are Vampire Survivors knockoffs. Yeah, something that stands out from that or from one of the other styles that's kind of all over the place. It definitely jumps out for me, no question. But at the same time, what do I like? Well, I like things that I remember from back in the day. And that's going to be things like this new wave of throwback JRPGs. And yeah, they bring new things to the table, sure. But the reason I like them is they are kind of throwback games. They are kind of what I remember from my childhood. And that's what I enjoy about them. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with liking something that is treading ground that many other people have trod. That's absolutely fine. But yeah, we do like to see those kind of innovations. It makes things easier for me. It makes things easier for me to talk about. But, anything that's done well, we appreciate seeing it, of course. Okay, the second one I have for you is from John Braz. Sorry if I'm mangling your name. This was we were talking about our terminology and how the indie moniker is kind of becoming less useful with time now that everything, at least on PC, everything is kind of indie now. And I mentioned the idea of people are trying to create this new term to describe the larger indie developers, and AAA gets thrown in here. So here's the comment here. AAA, I think, is a useful term for the rising star ex-indie studios that are starting to get AAA levels of budget and starting to see bureaucracy set in as they get larger organizationally, but are still culturally fresh, and that are able to use the success of whatever hit propelled them into the limelight to keep publishers and investors off their backs creatively. In other words, a AAA studio is one that is in its golden age and is about to become a victim of its own success. I think this is an interesting take. We can assign whatever objective metrics we want to use to describe whether a studio is AAA or AA or A+ or AAA or whatever we want to describe it as. And we can go by, I suggested using team size, or you can go by number of units sold, or revenue, or the number of games they produced, or the amount of time they've been in existence. Any number of objective, nice, neat, plain numbers. But ultimately, we look at the games they make and we ask, does this feel like an A-tier game, or does it feel like an indie game? You know, as I just said a few minutes ago, in the A-tier space at any given time, kind of all the games tend to look pretty similar. You know, there's 2 or 3 or 4 genres that are being made, and really just a handful of styles being made. Not a lot of risks being taken. Now, when we look in the indie space, there are often cliches and stereotypes down here too, but they are very distinct from what you see in the A-tier space. So we're getting to this situation where we have companies that structurally, in terms of their team size and their budgets, are clearly not indie developers anymore, but the games they make are not AAA games either, and we do kind of need something to call them. You know, in reality, this sector, this part of the industry, is much more of a spectrum these days. As such, there's going to be a lot of disagreement over where certain companies and where certain games belong. But ultimately, no matter what objective criteria you put down, you're going to look at a game and you're going to say, does this feel like an A-tier game or does it feel like an indie? And in years to come, we are going to start to need some language to describe these companies that exist in this kind of middle space, because calling them indie doesn't feel right, calling them AAA doesn't feel right. So we're going to need some way to describe them so we know what we're talking about. And I don't know what it's going to end up being, if it's going to be AAA, if it's going to be A+, whatever it is. Eventually, we're going to have to shake all this out, and hopefully we can come to some sort of common agreement about what language we're going to use here, if not necessarily what those terms mean. Anyway, that's what I have for my high-quality comments that I wanted to respond to. Now I'd like to make sure that everybody understands what my comment policy is, because I feel like it's very straightforward. As I've said, as long as you can be polite, as long as you can remember that I am a human being and not just some voice at the other end of the internet, and you can phrase your comments, however critical they may be, in a way that is respectful, I am more than happy to read them and consider them and respond to them, maybe here, maybe just in the thread where you made them. If, on the other hand, you can't be that, if you have to be an asshole, and I don't know why you have to be an asshole, because you always have the choice to just not watch my videos if you don't like them, but if you have to be an asshole, the comment you are seeing on screen will henceforth be my standard response to any comments that are rude, derisive, hostile, off-topic, nonsensical, or any combination thereof. Noting as I do, I thought, being as we are coming very close to the 20th anniversary of this website, that by now people would understand how YouTube works and how just social media in general works, and how engagement is very important to that, and how it's very hard for small creators to get engagement. And some of those people would realize that leaving comments regardless of what those comments are, actually helps the person receiving the comments. Which isn't to say that I like getting shitty comments. I mean, anytime I open the tab, if the VPN is working that day, and I see that I've got a lot of comments coming in, honestly, a lot of times my first thought is, I wonder who I've pissed off and why. And in fact, this morning, that's what happened. I just put out my very first review of 2025, and it made a bunch of people really mad. And that's kind of amazing to me. But at the same time, please, Brer Fox, don't leave pissy comments on all my videos. I hate this game I have to play, but I am playing it. But again, that is only for people who have a shitty attitude, who are going to be nasty. If you can be respectful, if you have a question, an earnest question you want answered, if you have a comment, if you have a difference of opinion, I am happy to hear them, and in the future you might show up in one of these videos. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I believe that my audience is going to be comprised of people who are thoughtful and intelligent, and yeah, I get the occasional jerk. Okay, I get a lot of jerks, but I think that we can have a conversation about this, passion that we all share here, and I would love to hear your opinions on anything I have to say. Just make sure to keep them respectful, and we will talk about this on another day.